Welcome everybody once again to CES 2019. We're here on the Stampede Global booth in the LVCC, and you can find us in the South Hall too. A good friend of mine is with me now, Steve Nesbit.
Adrian, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you very much. Steve
Great.
Nesbit is from Prestonwood Trail Holdings,
Right.
well known in the industry, a bit of a, I say, an industry veteran
Well, you're very
in the
kind.
digital signage and digital out-of-home space. Veteran sometimes means vintage, which
Doesn't mean I'm old.
it means you're aged.
I've aged.
That works.
Matured.
You've matured.
There you go.
So you come to all these shows.
I do.
We'll talk about the shows in a minute, but tell us a
They're
little bit
important.
about CES. What does CES mean for you?
Well, you know what? I always look here for ideas of new things that are happening in across a lot of different industries.
Right.
We need to. I think sometimes we get wrapped up, and we think that corporations drive economies around the world. When the reality is, I'll take in the United States, 75% of our economy is a consumer economy.
Right.
25% is corporate. And so things that touch consumers are really important. And when you've got an interest in technology and an interest in media, coming here trying to see what new things are happening and projecting into the future is always fun.
Right. Okay. Now you must have been here dozens of times, I guess.
Yeah, I've been here about a dozen times. That's probably right.
Now, you've got a specific interest in startups and incubators and things, and you would tell us a little bit what you've seen from a startup perspective here today.
Yeah, I think that's the really thing that I've seen the most so far here today, and I haven't been able to walk through all the things I want to see. But my first impression is that there are probably more startups here than we've ever seen before.
Really? Okay.
And that's very good.
That's an
because
interesting statistic.
I think there's a case to be made that as we project into the future, with economies changing, where are we going to get jobs? Automation takes over so many of the jobs we have in traditional businesses that where are people going to work? We have to support our families, we have to educate our people, we have to pay for health care. And if there aren't any jobs, how do you do that?
Right.
And I really believe that startups fuel the jobs of the future. Think about how many people are employed today by Lyft and Uber that 10 years ago, those jobs weren't there.
Right.
Think about how many jobs Amazon today has that 20 years ago weren't there. So we need to continue to fill that, and I see more and more of that here.
Of these startups here, are they US or international, or what's the mix?
Well, that's both good news and bad news if you're an American.
Okay.
On the good news side, there's more and more startups globally, and
Okay.
that's good for jobs everywhere in the world. And being led by countries like France and Israel and India and countries like that have really created environments for startups to start and thrive and grow. The United States, particularly Silicon Valley, which historically is known as the leader in the world in startups, has really fallen off a lot recently. So that's the concerning part parochially as an American, that we need to do a better job.
You said there's maybe not enough North American startups here.
Not as many proportionally as historically there have
Wow.
been.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And so from a digital signage and digital home perspective, is it worthwhile people coming to CES?
Clearly, if you start looking at what are the things that you want to keep your hand on the pulse or your thumb on the pulse of what's going to make this industry grow, both in the advertising and non-advertising, particularly around things like big data.
Okay.
Because data, as you know, Adrian, because you're an expert in here and you report on this on a daily basis, data is the driver, it's the currency from which we're going to be growing the advertising and non-advertising side of digital signage. And if you want, I'll go a little more detail into that, but looking for that, that's one of the things I have my antenna up here for, is trying to see how many companies are focusing.
It's surprising how many media companies keep coming back to CES. I think it started a couple of years ago when C-Space first came along at the area, but it's grown not just from the C-Space space, everywhere. We were at the Encore yesterday with a number of media agencies, and TV companies are all here. That's a really, really big thing, I think.
Well, no doubt. I think the key here is, and I'm preaching to the choir here with you, Adrian, because I know you know this, but if you look at how money has been spent in the last 15 to 20 years in the advertising side, the media side of business, it's off the charts today on how that money has changed. It used to be a huge proportion went to television, then a bunch of it went to print advertising, a bunch of it went to radio. Well, all of those traditional media properties have been significantly shrinking in recent years because of our lifestyles are different and we consume media differently. And so this piece of the pie today that we call digital media is now almost 50% of the spend.
Right.
And so traditional media companies, startup media companies, and new media companies are all saying, how can I get my fair share of that money that's moving?
Right.
Because it is moving, and if you can prove effectiveness, you can get it to come into your media.
Okay. So you started the year off with CES. Where will we see you for the rest of the year?
I typically follow where my clients go, and my clients go to where the action is. And the action clearly is at a small set of shows like this around the world. CES clearly kicks off the year. Then you've got ISE in Europe.
Okay.
That's
Amsterdam.
hugely important because it covers another part of the world. London Digital Signage Week is the place to go. If you're in Europe and the Middle East, in the May time frame. Then there's New York Digital Signage Week in October. That's really, really important. Infocom's important.
In June, yeah.
And then there's another one back here in Las Vegas called Digital Signage Expo that with a very focused look at the digital signage industry.
And we'll see you at all of those.
Pardon me? I'm going to go to every one of those this year. Yeah, I have clients going to them, and I search the same kinds of things I search at CES. If you want to stay on top of the currency in the industry, I think this is important.
Brilliant. Steve, thanks very much for coming
Adrian,
on the show.
thank you. Good luck. Thanks.